Did you miss me? Oh my god, I didn't turn on the lights. Much better. I know it's been a minute, but I'm back in California now. Hope you've been doing well, and also I would really like to show you my t-shirt. See? My little girlfriend in the UK, nay, my wife in the UK, Leanne, got this for me for my birthday. We got to spend my birthday together in Nottingham, actually, which was super cool. But as I said, I'm back in the States now, and if I seem a little silly today, it's because I am supremely jet lagged. I have been awake since 12:45 a.m. and it's now currently 11 a.m. I feel like I've had almost a full day at this point, but I have no idea when my jet lag is gonna get better. I have no idea when I'm gonna start feeling better, so, you know, it's rock and roll, baby. The show goes on. As you saw by the title of today's video, I will be getting into all of the stuff that I watched in August, but first, yet another part of the intro, many apologies, but I got a package from Hunters Against Hate, which is super cool, and also many apologies. I've been traveling for 3 months. I'm not quite sure when this was sent to me, but I thought that I would open it on camera for you. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Hey, what do we got? Okay, very cute. Right off the bat, we got a patch here. Colorful. Love it. Extremely cute sticker. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. I was gone too long. I think this was sent to me like back in July because this was supposed to be like promoting a fundraising event. Oh, I'm sorry. It looked like it was gonna be a cool thing. Many apologies to Hunters Against Hate. I'm sorry that I wasn't home to receive this package and promote this for you. It sounds like a really good cause. It was a fundraising event to benefit the LGBTQ youth across the US. And I got a t-shirt. Oh my god. That's so cute. It has like their logo, and then in a rainbow it has everything that they're like against, you know? I hope you can see that because hate is the scariest thing of all. Too true, bestie. Speaking of things of that nature, first of all, thank you to Hunters Against Hate. I'll hopefully link their info down below so that you can go support them and stuff. But there's just another like little itty bitty thing, just little thing I want to touch on before we get into the topic of today's video. Hi, excuse me. Hello, sorry, I need to butt in for just a second. I want to make it clear that I'm not telling you how to vote, but I am personally voting no. Just me. That's just me though. That's just me. So that's that on that. I'm going to be dropping off my ballot later today. I hope that you do the same before September 14th. Do not forget, if you're in California, get out there please and vote. But without further ado, wow. Now it's really time to get into all of the movies that I watched in August. Although this was something that I couldn't record on Letterboxd that I wish I could. I wish you could record seasons of TV shows on Letterboxd, but you can't. But over the month of August, I rewatched season 3 of American Horror Story, Coven. Ugh, that season, I forget how good it is. And like every time that I watch it, I'm like, oh my god, how did I forget that it was this good? Because I'm a fool. I was showing it to my German sister and she ended up really liking it as well. But that wasn't on Letterboxd. I just wanted to give a shout out to that season because I love it. Up first from the month of August would be Sherlock Holmes, starring Robert Downey Jr. from 2009. When a string of brutal murders terrorizes London, it doesn't take long for legendary detective Sherlock Holmes and his crime-solving partner Dr. Watson to find the killer, Lord Blackwood. The game is afoot when Blackwood seems to rise from the grave, plunging Holmes and Watson into the world of the occult and strange technologies. Mr. Sherlock Holmes has received a 3.5 stars from me. This movie was one that I loved when I was younger. Like, it was on par with Pirates of the Caribbean, not Harry Potter, but like Pirates of the Caribbean, you know, we have Robert Downey Jr. that's kind of the equivalent to Captain Jack Sparrow. He's kind of just the zany lead. Still enjoyable, but only 3.5 stars. It's not really as good as I remembered. And also the homoerotic undertones were a lot more flavorful than I remembered. So in my review, because this movie was directed by Guy Ritchie, I just said gay Ritchie. I know, so funny, horribly clever. It's still a fun movie. If you haven't seen it, I think that you should see it. Definitely gateway horror, very light horror vibes, plus a great cast. I do think that it is worth watching. The next thing that I watched was a movie called The Loved Ones from 2009 as well. In order to avoid a ghostly figure in the road, Brent Mitchell wraps his car around a tree, killing his father. While his mother goes to pieces, Brent escapes into a want-a-fueled world of pain and guilt. That is a weird synopsis for what this movie actually is. I always just read off like the Google synopsis. This movie is really more about this guy who, like, yeah, he's going through all of that, but also he gets kidnapped by this girl that wants to use him as a prom date. And because it's a horror movie, you can imagine where that goes. I only gave this movie 2 stars, and in my review, I just said that was fucking gross because that movie was not a good time for me. No. I would definitely categorize The Loved Ones as torture porn, so it's just not for me. I don't know exactly what I was expecting, but for some reason it just wasn't that. But it stars this one guy from the 3rd Twilight movie, Eclipse, and I always thought he was kind of yummy, and then he was in this movie and I was like, oh word, I'm gonna check it out. And I wish I hadn't done that. I gave it 2 stars because I think the gore was really well done. I hate it, but very realistic. I think it's a pretty unique story. I hadn't really seen anything like that before. But it was also very basic. It was a very simple story, and sometimes that's fine, but I think the only thing that this movie had going for it was all of the gore. There is kind of like this poetic, cyclical nature to the story, and it all like kind of comes back around, comes together in the end type beat, but not worth it in my opinion. No, I don't enjoy. Excuse me. I must interrupt yet again. I can't believe I forgot to talk about the fact that this movie also has a completely pointless subplot. Like, his friend asks this hot goth girl to go to the dance, and then the movie also follows his misadventures with her and like hooking up with her and whatever happens to them over the course of the night. And that entire subplot serves positively no function. Zero. None. It's bonkers. So I feel like that's also worth noting. The movie just like really enjoys wasting your time. Although, sorry, we're going layer and layer here. I'm thinking now, maybe is it possibly to like juxtapose the night that his friend was having? Like, ooh, look, this guy is having a great prom night, but ooh, you never know what could be happening because his friend is being tortured by some crazy chick and her dad. But I don't think that I want to give the movie that much credit. Up next, I saw the sequel to Escape Room Tournament of Champions. 6 people unwittingly find themselves locked in another series of escape rooms, slowly uncovering what they have in common to survive. This movie got 4 stars and a heart from me, and I just don't really understand where all of the hate is coming from for this movie. Like, it's not really that good, and there are just so many big bummer inconsistencies from this movie to the first one. I feel like they kind of fumbled the bag when it comes to making a franchise. Like, they should have made this maybe the 3rd or 4th movie in the franchise, maybe even 5th or 6th. Like, give us 4 or 5 escape room movies and then give us the sole survivor of each of those and put them in the Tournament of Champions. Now that would be cool. But nonetheless, still gave it 4 stars and a heart, as I said, because even despite it not being a great sequel, maybe not being a great movie, it's super entertaining. I had a great time watching it. Like, I just think it was super fun, and hence in my review I said, what is everyone so mad about? Do you hate having fun? But yeah, fairly basic movie. So moving on, the next movie that I watched surprisingly for the very first time would be The Craft from 1996. After transferring to a Los Angeles high school, Sarah finds that her telekinetic gift appeals to a group of 3 wannabe witches who happen to be seeking a 4th member for their rituals. Bonnie, Rochelle, and Nancy, like Sarah herself, all have troubled backgrounds, which combined with their powers leads to dangerous consequences. I don't really want to get into my thoughts on this one because I did already do an entire rant video. I did that over on my vlog channel actually, because I was doing a get ready with me video and it wasn't scripted at all. That's what I do over on my vlog channel. I do some get ready with me sometimes, and those are always just on the fly, just off the cuff, whatever comes into my little noggin. So I already made a whole rant about all of my feelings on that movie, but basically just to break it down, if you don't want to watch that video, I gave it 3 stars because I did really enjoy the movie up until the 3rd act. The ending of the movie was just such a clusterfuck. Like, whose idea was it to have a male screenwriter and director to tell the story, a coming of age story of 4 teenage girls? I was just wildly disappointed. Very unfortunate. After that, I watched Mama, the 2013 Guillermo del Toro film. On the day that their parents die, sisters Lily and Victoria vanish in the woods, prompting a frantic search by their uncle Lucas and his girlfriend Annabelle. 5 years later, miraculously, the girls are found alive in a decaying cabin, and Lucas and Annabelle welcome them into their home. But as Annabelle tries to reintroduce the children to a normal life, she finds that someone, or something, still wants to tuck them in at night. That's a great synopsis, is it not? Great synopsis, yes. Great movie, it is not. I gave it 2.5 stars because I think that the story was so rich and interesting. I loved the story of it. But almost the entire execution is like... I said whoever styled Jessica Chastain deserves prison. Now listen, I've seen a lot of people on Letterboxd saying, yes, goth Jessica Chastain is what we deserved, and this is true, but I ask you, did we deserve it like this? Did we deserve it like this? She literally has the haircut of the babysitter from Monster House, and that movie came out in 2005. So whoever styled her gave her like the most outdated gothic look. I hate it. I don't know if that's a wig or whatever, but I don't like it. And I just feel like she's also way too flat of a character to be rocking that kind of a look. I don't know. It's off. It doesn't work for me. But she does her best. I think she does still have one of the best acting performances of the movie. Where this movie just like really fails is the ending. Because I do think that most of the build-up and the story itself is super interesting. I find it very gripping, and at times I do think it's really spooky. However, the ending is like so fucking dumb. Yeah, so skip ahead a little bit to avoid some spoilers. But the fact that Jessica Chastain's character just like keeps getting knocked back down and then just like keeps getting back up and crawling, and the fact that that happens not once, not twice, but I believe 3 times, it's too much. Cut it. I can't believe that made it through every single round of production, and they shot it and they were like, she'll just keep doing it over and over, and that's good. Yeah, I'm sorry, that got old and silly real fast. But anyways, I still feel like it's worth watching. Like, yeah, it has a goofy ending, but the story is very rich and I think very unique. Up next, first time watch, that would be Trick or Treat from 2007. Interwoven stories demonstrate that some traditions are best not forgotten. As the residents of a small town face real ghosts and goblins on Halloween, tales of terror reveal the consequences of extinguishing a jack-o'-lantern before midnight and a grumpy hermit's encounter with a sinister trick-or-treater. I watched this on August the 13th, Friday the 13th, because I didn't have any of my Friday the 13th movies with me and I didn't know where I could watch them anywhere online. But I did declare it on my horror Instagram story. I said, I declare today the official start of spooky season. Because nowhere does it say that I don't have the power to do that, so I declared Friday, August the 13th, the beginning of spooky season, and so I watched a Halloween movie to, you know, get in the zone. Give it 3.5 stars and a heart. It very much gave me the vibes of the Creepshow series on Shudder. Same kind of a style, same kind of a B-movie type of atmosphere, and I really liked it. Like, I thoroughly enjoyed the entire movie. It just gave me all the good, warm, spooky feelings. You know how sometimes movies that are scary, they feel very cold and it's scary. This was one of those movies where it gave me the warm spooky feelings, like the good spooky feelings that remind you of childhood and like the Scholastic Book Fair. So highly recommend, especially if you're a late 90s, early 2000s baby. If you want to feel like you've gone home, if you want to go back to your elementary school days, then watch this movie. I don't know, that's the best way I can explain it. Damn, I watched some good movies in August. Okay, next up would be Urban Legend from 1998. A university is experiencing gruesome murders that resemble old urban legends. Soon the quiet college campus is transformed into hunting grounds for a maniac, and Natalie struggles to find the killer and stop the bloodshed before she becomes the next victim. This is another movie where I feel like people are tripping. I gave it 4 stars and a heart. I thought it was so enjoyable, and I think that the #1 complaint and why people don't maybe like this movie that much is because of how much it resembles Scream. It's definitely 100% a Scream copycat kind of a movie, but I ask you, why do we decide to be mad about this? Do we not want more Scream content in our lives? Yes, it is a lesser version. Yes, the lead actress is probably the worst actor in the entire film, but I feel like this movie is a prime example of why the 90s is such an overlooked decade in horror. Like, yeah, it's a Scream copycat, but I think it did it really well. And also worth noting, a while back, I did a collab with Jennifer Vega, and we did our top 10 horror movie openings of all time. And because I hadn't seen this movie yet, it wasn't on the list, but this 100% would have made the list had I seen it before making that video. So I'm putting it on there now. If I ever redo that video, which I probably won't, this would make my top 10, maybe even top 5. That opening scene had me quaking. It had me shaking in my boots. Good cast, good cameos, really good mystery. I think the killer reveal was really fun. I don't know. Watch it. Just watch it. Anyways, up next. We have the Suicide Squad. The government sends the most dangerous supervillains in the world, Bloodsport, Peacemaker, King Shark, Harley Quinn, and others to the remote enemy-infused island of Corto Maltese. Armed with high-tech weapons, they trek through the dangerous jungle on a search-and-destroy mission with only Colonel Rick Flag on the ground to make them behave. This movie was so... This movie was so much fun. I don't even remember the last time I had that much fun in a movie theater. No, that's a lie. I do. It was Godzilla vs. Kong. But I actually rated this movie higher. I gave it 4.5 stars and a heart. There was very little about this movie that I would change, and I know there's a lot of haters that are like, James Gunn does the same thing in all of his movies. It's all just about like the character introductions, and it's so distracting and gets in the way of the narrative. This movie, especially as a horror fan and especially as an action movie fan, I felt that I was just given a gift. It was the most wonderful marriage of like action and gore that I feel like I've ever seen. That is also not true. Look at me just lying out here. I know I talk too much. Just stop me next time. Oh my god. I think maybe the best example of this is probably Kingsman: The Secret Service, but I don't know, because this movie, The Suicide Squad, might take its place. In my review, I simply said, The Suicide Squad is a slasher film. Period. A lot of you guys actually agreed with that one. Thank you. Because it's true. It's very gory. It's just really fun. It's so stupid. And that's really all that it's meant to be. And I love also how it really does feel like it is catered to adults as well. Because I feel like the first one, I think the sense of humor of that one and like how bad the CGI was and how little attention was really paid to the comedy in that movie, I feel like it was geared a lot more towards teenagers, where I feel like The Suicide Squad, I think at any age you could probably enjoy it. Yeah, a lot of it is a little bit juvenile, but it's, you know, maybe a guilty pleasure, whatever. Sometimes John Cena wearing a stupid little mask or Al Pacino's voice coming out of a giant shark man is all I need. Not perfect, knocked off half of a star because some of the comedy, yes, not for me. And also one of the deaths truly broke my heart. I was not happy about that. The bottom line is, if you just want to have fun, then go see this movie. So that's enough for me then on that one. Up next, on a similar note, would be Free Guy, also a new summer blockbuster. When a bank teller discovers he's actually a background player in an open world video game, he decides to become the hero of his own story. In a world where there's no limits, he's determined to save the day his way before it's too late, and maybe find a little romance with the coder who conceived him. This movie, it's supposed to do similar things that The Suicide Squad did. It's definitely not as gory, but it also definitely takes on a more juvenile, just fun action approach. And when I say a little bit more juvenile, it's a lot more juvenile. Like, this movie was definitely made for gamers who are a bit younger. I think that children and teenagers are definitely more the audience for this movie, but I still had a good time with it. I gave it 3.5 stars and a heart. I enjoyed the movie. I love that at its core, it's a movie that's about friendship. I thought it was super cute. I think that the actors they chose worked really well, and it was just a fun time. I also noted on Letterboxd, I said I didn't know Ryan Reynolds leading a socialist revolution was the movie I needed to see, but here we are. True facts. There are also some really fun surprises, some good cameos, just things that I absolutely did not expect, and it made the movie a lot of fun, but just had to knock off some points because a lot of it was just a bit too juvenile for me, and I just wasn't really the audience for that. Up next would be another rewatch, and that would be Insidious from 2010. I think we all know it here on this channel, but I'll read the synopsis nonetheless. Parents take drastic measures when it seems their new home is haunted and their comatose son is possessed by a malevolent entity. This one kind of surprised me because I remember always loving Insidious, and like, I mean, I still do, but this first movie, it doesn't do it for me in the same way really anymore. I gave it 3.5 stars and a heart though, which still, that's pretty good, because I do think it is highly unique. It definitely signaled the rebirth of the haunted house subgenre in horror for the entirety of the 2010s, but also I'm just not really super big on that style of film anymore. I think it worked a lot better when they had a bigger budget with the following movie, but like the the loud bangs of the jump scares, just they get on my nerves a little bit now, and some of the elements in the movie don't hold up super well. Like they're a little bit goofy. Like the whole gas mask kind of a scene, like what was going on there? But that's okay. Sometimes we kind of grow out of some of our favorite movies and they're just really good at the time. I will always continue to rewatch it and love the movie, but it's just not like totally my cup of tea anymore, you know? After that, I watched The Fly, the original from 1958. When a scientist tests his matter transporter on himself, an errant housefly makes its way into the transportation chamber and things go horribly wrong. Slowly losing himself to the fly, he turns to his wife Helene for help. I surprisingly gave this movie 4 stars and a heart because, it's a surprise because most of the entirety of this movie is just like about the drama of this family trying to catch a fly. Like that's what is happening in most of the story, but I think why I liked it so much is because it's definitely like a classic whodunit kind of murder mystery. It definitely doesn't follow that exact formula, you know, it's a very unique high concept version of a whodunit, but at its core, like that's what it is. And Vincent Price plays the inspector, so of course I'm a fan. And the ending was like, I don't know if it's the old special effects, the old practical effects, whatever it is, but the ending of that movie is also very unnerving, very weird. And it did really get under my skin. I think it does hold up decently well. It's a very interesting movie and I do think it's worth watching because it is one of those classic monster movies, you know, from the 50s. After that, I actually did a double feature because after that I was very curious and I wanted to watch the remake from 1986. And obviously it's roughly the same synopsis, but this is directed by David Cronenberg, who definitely stamps his style onto this film. And also in this movie, the scientist is named Seth Brundle and he has a girlfriend who is just horrified because like the person that she once loved is deteriorating into a monster. So at its core, this is honestly more of a romance kind of a story. Super, super weird. And my Letterboxd review, I literally just said, but I did give it 3.5 stars. I do think the movie is really good. I don't necessarily think that it's for me because it is really disgusting. I do feel a sense of morbid curiosity now though, and I kind of have a hankering to watch more David Cronenberg movies because I don't even like gore, but the way that it was done in this movie, it felt a little bit less realistic, even though the practical effects are incredible, but they were just so high concept and not human. Like, I don't know. What I'm saying is like, it didn't feel super realistic. So I feel like I can handle watching more of Cronenberg's movies if they follow kind of a similar style. I mean, it was really gross. I did have to look away at some parts because this man's body parts are just literally falling off left and right. And he's turning into just one of the grossest movie monsters I think I've ever seen. I don't think I'd recommend it to everybody, although I do kind of feel like it is a movie that every horror fan should watch at some point. So do with that what you will. Up next, I rewatched Jurassic World from 2015. The Jurassic World Luxury Resort provides a habitat for an array of genetically engineered dinosaurs, including the vicious and intelligent Indominus Rex. When the massive creature escapes, it sets off a chain reaction that causes the other dinos to run amok. I gave this one 4 stars and a heart. I think this movie is a lot of fun. I do. I think it's very charming. And yeah, I mean, it has its issues, like maybe not all the characters are super likable, but sometimes their lack of likability leads to more interesting conflict and more interesting dialogue between them. And I think it also leads some of them to make more interesting choices in the movie, let's say. And I also love all the callbacks to the original movie because I remember when I watched this for the first time in theaters and I was just like, it's the original place. Oh my god, that's the original banner and the painting of the Velociraptor on the wall and the original Jeeps. Oh my god. I have to admit, I am a sucker for nostalgia and I love the original movie so much. So I really appreciated that. And I also think it was a really interesting commentary, not only on our society today, but also to remakes and reboots of classic movies. It's this premise of man playing God to an even higher degree than the first movie by creating the Indominus Rex. Because in the original, the antagonists were like the T-Rex and the Velociraptor, but how do you up the stakes with a reboot? And I think they made the appropriate choice. I really, really liked the storyline of Jurassic World. I don't know if that's a super popular opinion, but it seems like a lot of people don't really like this movie. I hear you on that. I am also very nostalgic nostalgic for the original. I grew up watching the original, so I had high expectations for this reboot. And I think it definitely stands alone. Like, I think it's a good enough movie on its own. I think it also does work as a reboot because it is different enough to the original. And it also gave us something that the original trilogy never did, which was having the park be open with tourists and having all the dinosaurs attacking a giant mob of tourists. So in my opinion, like, I don't know, what more could we really ask for of this movie? Like I said, has its problems, but it's a lot of fun. So moving on, I also rewatched Insidious Chapter 2. Soon after their showdown with evil spirits that possessed their son, the Lamberts, Renee, and Josh are ready for their lives to return to normal. However, something still is seriously off, especially with Josh, who, unbeknown to Renee, is possessed too. So this movie, Insidious Chapter 2, it's a bit of a different story to the first movie. I gave it 4.5 stars and a heart because this is the superior Insidious film. Say what you want. Say whatever you want. Type your little comments down below. Insidious Chapter 2 is the superior Insidious film, and I will die on that hill. I've talked about this a lot on my channel. I don't really want to get into it. It's just a really beautiful continuation of the story. Kind of has some Interstellar vibes with how the story is kind of woven in with the first movie. I think it's gorgeous. And I also think that there is a little bit less cheesiness than there is in the first movie. I think they took the concepts from the original Insidious movie and they either built upon them or they kind of changed them to up them and make them a lot scarier. And also, I think that the jump scares are a lot more intense in Insidious Chapter 2. There were some of them that I kind of forgot about and they got me. So that is my favorite one in the franchise. I know, hot take. Moving on, I watched another 50s movie, Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. Turned into a giantess by an alien, a woman finds her husband in a bar with a woman that he is cheating on her with. So that synopsis, a bit misleading because that's actually what happens in the very end of the movie. Most of the movie is just kind of the build-up and setting up the relationships of the movie, like this man with his wife and this woman that he is cheating on her with. Really interesting character dynamics, but it also just kind of like doesn't add up with this giant alien that came from the sky. Like the two stories that are going on, they don't go together that well. And also, she is not a 50-foot woman until like the last 10 minutes of the movie or something like that, which I have found to be a theme of a lot of 50s monster movies that were trying to do it the way that other more successful monster movies were. This movie just wasn't that good. I gave it 2.5 stars because I feel like the different stories that were going on were very interesting. I was really invested in the character relationship dynamic that was going on with this husband and wife. And then I was also very interested in this giant alien ship that everybody was like, yo, what the fuck is this? But I don't think it worked well together. I also was very disappointed that this movie wasn't really about an attack of a 50-foot woman. Even in my review, I said more like the casual walking around of the 50-foot woman because she didn't really attack much of anything. Like, she destroyed maybe 1 or 2 buildings, but for the most part, she kind of was just like walking around town. So I don't really recommend that one. Up next would be Behind the Fright, the making of American Horror Story. This was the behind the scenes made in 2012 of the very first American Horror Story season, and I gave it 4.5 stars and a heart. It was damn near perfect to me, but yet again, this happened to me last month when I watched Behind the Scream, which was the documentary about the behind the scenes of the Scream trilogy. I wanted more. I really wanted more, but I gave this one a bit of a higher score because I do think that they went a little bit more in depth. Like the whole thing, almost the entire thing was just cast and crew interviews. So I thought it was so sick and like kind of bizarre to be able to hear the perspectives of all of these actors after they had just finished shooting or were in the middle of shooting the first season of American Horror Story, because they really did not know the impact that that show would have. So it's really, really cool to watch the behind the scenes back then before they even knew what it was gonna be. But you can also tell that they kind of have a sense maybe of like the cultural impact it was gonna have. All of them said something to the effect of, yeah, like this show is different. This show is built different. So yeah, just super interesting. And also, like, as a filmmaker myself, I love behind the scenes stuff, obviously. Up next, the next 3 movies actually that I watched are all also movies from the 1950s. If you haven't caught my drift yet, I'm going to be doing a decades of horror theme for this spooky season on my channel. I'm very excited. So starting with the 1950s, I'm gonna be doing my top 10 horror movies from each decade. So I've been watching a lot of movies from the 1950s. If you haven't noticed, which you probably have because a lot of you follow me on Letterboxd, but it's been really fun. So up next would be The Tingler from 1959. Dr. Warren Chapin has made a surprising discovery. The spine-chilling sensation that people get when scared is due to a parasite that he dubs the Tingler. He concludes that in extreme circumstances, prolonged fear can cause the creature to damage a person's spine and even cause death if the victim can't scream. Soon, the Tingler is on the loose. This one I gave 3.5 stars. It wasn't a movie that I was super crazy about because at times I feel like it kind of dragged, but that's just sort of a problem with a lot of movies from the 50s. They do really like to meander. On Letterboxd, all I said was the drama with the little, you got the hand, because that was my favorite part about this movie. This also stars Vincent Price, my man from the 50s. He was my favorite horror actor from back then. He really makes this movie what it is. I think if he wasn't starring in it, then it would have been a much worse movie. But I think they're very imaginative. I think that the cinematography is very artful. I love the style of a lot of 50s movies. And also the practical effects of the monster, like, they're not bad. Obviously, by today's standards, we look at them with, some question marks, but it holds up relatively well, like a lot better than I was expecting that it would. The next two movies, maybe not so much. The next one would be The Blob from 1958. This sci-fi classic follows teenagers Steve and his best girl Jane as they try to protect their hometown from a gelatinous alien life form that engulfs everything it touches. But no one else has seen the goo, and policeman Dave refuses to believe the kids without proof. So this one I gave 2 stars. And not to be that guy, but this movie definitely needed more Blob. Also, another hilarious thing worth noting, the teenager Steve in this movie is played by Steve McQueen, and he is 28 years old, but back then people I think aged a little bit faster than they do now. So by today's standards, he looks about 40. And the reason why this is funny is because whenever all the policemen are coming around and stuff, they always call him Sonny or young man and stuff, as if he's not a whole adult. That was just kind of off-putting, just a little bit funny. And then yeah, there is not much Blob in this movie, and I'm like, why do 50s movies love to meander so much? There's so much useless stuff that happens in the movie. Did I already say I gave it 2 stars? I only gave it 2 stars. There are some scenes, I think the opening scene, that are really compelling and well done, but for the most part, I don't know, it's just kind of a weird movie. It hasn't held up well. And lastly, the last movie that I watched in August, that would be Return of the Fly, the sequel to The Fly. This came out in 1959. Philip insists on refurbishing his father's laboratory and continuing his investigations. The idea would be bad enough on its own, but he hires an assistant who calls himself Alan Hinds, but is actually a wanted criminal. So yes, Vincent Price does return for this movie, and yes, it is more of an all-out kind of classic 50s monster movie because we get to spend more time with The Fly, but it's basically just a remake of the first movie. We have returning cast member Vincent Price, and then the guy that gets turned into a fly is the first guy's son. So it's the same movie, but there's just a lot less suspense and a lot less mystery. It is fun towards the end when it becomes just a pretty straightforward monster movie with the fly killing a bunch of people. But because I enjoyed the first so much and I really enjoyed the mystery, I don't know, I was kind of expecting, I guess, something a little bit more different, a little bit more unique, a little more tasty, but I don't really feel like it's worth watching. I was just kind of bored having just watched the first one, so I don't know. Oh my god, my nails, they look, oh, why didn't you tell me? Oh my god, they look so bad. Anyways, on that note, that concludes everything that I watched in the month of August. Again, I will be voting no on the recall, but that's just me, bestie. And also be sure to support Haunters Against Hate. Their info will be linked down below. A big thank you again for sending this to me. I really hope that you guys are excited for my Decades of Horror series that's going to be coming out. Hopefully, the next video that comes out is going to be my top 10 of the 1950s. At least that's what I'm planning for. We will see. And then I think I'm going to be doing either some kind of specialized video. I had an idea to do The Blob through the ages. So I would talk about the first Blob, the remake from the 70s, and then the one from the 80s, and just kind of talk about the evolution of the Blob, but do that for maybe multiple different movies that have a bunch of remakes like that. Another good one might be Dracula, but that feels like it's its own whole thing. There are too many Dracula movies. But then I also thought to do a full review for each of my favorite favorite movies from each decade. I thought that would be really cool and fun. I did post a poll over on my community tab if you would like to check that out and you'd like to vote on what you'd like to see this spooky season. I'm already pretty set on doing my top 10 lists and some of those specialized videos, but if you have any more ideas, of course, let me know. But all that to say, it is noon and I am still wide awake. Can I get a W in the chat? I've been going to bed between like 2 and 5 p.m. every day, and I've just been like immeasurably tired. I have not felt like a real human being lately. So W's in the chat. It is noon and I feel alive. On that note, check out all my social media. Everything will be linked down below. Rock and roll. Goodbye.